Thomas Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 39.
Hey there. I hope you're all doing wonderfully. So this episode starts the, streak or plan or trial run of taking this show weekly. Now, this was a decision wasn't made lightly. It was a lot of consideration, but there are two overwhelming factors that made me decide to give this a go and see if this is something that'll work and see if it's something, worthwhile doing. The first of those decisions was just, I've been very lucky with the people who have agreed to be on the show, and since I've been doing the show now this is the 39th episode, I've been getting people asking to be on the show. People I've no prior contact with, not friends, not even, Twitter acquaintances or anything like that. So, just getting more requests that way, branching out a little bit with some upcoming episodes of, going beyond comic creators, and I got some metal YouTube creators coming on that I'm really excited to talk to, and all that just kind of boiled over and I had this huge list of people that I'm like, well, I want to talk to them all. Doing this show twice a month, it's going to be a very long time, and I like to schedule things out and trying to accommodate people who have things coming out sooner than the 4 or 5 months away that I'd probably be able to actually talk to them if I was doing bi-weekly. I thought, give it a shot. At the very least, for the next 2 to 3 months, it'll be weekly. A ton of great people have shows out, and you can all enjoy it that way. The second deciding factor for doing weekly shows is just to see if it does anything to the numbers. I don't do this show for any type of major reason other than it being a selfish thing. Again, I've said this before. I like talking to people about things they're passionate about. It re-energizes me. We don't get a lot of that social interaction. I don't get a lot of that social interaction non-pandemic times. So getting that through the podcast is really great. And I've, been very happy with all the conversations I've had with everybody. The stuff that's been on the show, the stuff that, the conversations that have happened off the show, it's enriched my life. So, that's why I do this show. But I would like more people to listen to the show because the people I talk to I think are amazing, and I want to spread the word on their amazingness. So I'm hoping that, maybe going weekly, maybe that'll boost some numbers, get some more... I have a consistent listenership, and I'm very appreciative of that. It seems I hit the same kind of numbers for pretty much every episode, and with a few outliers here and there. And yeah, I'm incredibly thankful for that. But, if I can get more people to listen to and appreciate the people that I'm bringing on, that's what I want to do. So I'm giving this a shot. That was the other major deciding factor in going weekly. So hopefully it all pans out. Now, of course, going weekly, that gives me less time to do anything regarding this show. And it also gives me a bit less time to really dig into any comic or music recommendations. So while I'm still going to be doing them, it's going to be even more informal than they already are. So that's going to be something. And there might not be recommendations on every show, but it's all what I can do, what I can manage and get through. Again, the highlights of the show, I think, and the purpose of the show is the conversation I'm having with these creative people. So I just try to give the recommendations and all that just to, give some extra content, some extra positive stuff to people who might dig on whatever it is I'm recommending. On top of all this, I've become a lot busier with my own work, my own artistic output, and I have this habit of like, okay, I'm booked up, good. And then someone's like, hey, I got this idea. It's a short story. It's not due for many months from now. Can you do it? I'm like, many months from now? Of course. Of course I can do that. Of course, that also means, though, a lot of layouts and a lot of the heavy lifting and thinking of these stories needs to be done relatively soon. So, yeah, I'm kind of in layout brain at the moment, and that's a rough spot because I love doing layouts, even if they're difficult. But when you're doing layouts for multiple short stories, you're it's these radical shifts. You try not to reuse shots. You try to change things up, add some more dynamic angles and things like that, and you want to serve each story the best you can and not just end up copying, pasting, particular images or poses or layout ideas between each one to save time. So, yeah, I'm a little frazzled in the old brainy hole with layouts, but it'll all be worth it when it's time, because of course the drawing is the hard part, and it is a hard part. It's kind of, with layouts, you're thinking about what do I want to represent on the page, and when you're actually drawing and penciling and inking, it's more like, okay, how do I best execute what I want? So it's definitely easier than layouts, I would say, but it's also more time consuming because it's got to be polished and nice and all that. So yeah, that's kind of where my brain is right now. So I haven't really been able to dive into too many comics, but I did get a chance to finish off the Invincible animated series on Amazon Prime, and being a big fan of the comic itself, I was completely stoked for the series, and I think they did an amazing job. I've seen comments online about how the animation style isn't all that great and all that. I think they did a fantastic job incorporating the look of the book of Corey Walker's art and just making that appear in the show. Having that go. I'm not an animation guy though, so I'm sure there's beautiful, just excellent examples of animation that probably would have elevated the show or whatever, but I think it was fine. They somehow managed to be more violent than the book, and that was kind of off-putting in some scenes. But I'm not going to say too much about it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think the voice cast was amazing. Stephen Yeun as Mark was just perfect. Sandra Oh and J.K. Simmons as parents, also perfect. Everyone was perfect. Even Seth Rogen as Alan the alien. I don't hate Seth Rogen or anything like that, but I'm not exactly the #1 Seth Rogen fan. But as much as I like Alan, I'm like, oh, Seth, he's going to be Alan the alien? I guess. But no, he did a great job. He got Alan, and I'm looking forward to seeing that character develop with him. And yeah, everyone did great. Jason Mantzoukas as Rex. When is Jason Mantzoukas not just endlessly entertaining? So he was perfect as Rex, and Zachary Quinto as Robot. And yeah, it's it was a great show, great cast. I really recommend. I'm glad they got 2 more seasons already approved. So that was nice to hear. But yeah, Invincible, Amazon Prime, yeah, definitely worth it. Okay, so for music, if you're in anywhere adjacent to the metal scene right now, you know that Gojira dropped a new album. And if you've listened to any episode at any point in the history of me doing this show, you know I love me some Gojira. So how am I not going to talk about this album right now? So yes, Gojira released their new album, Fortitude, and it's amazing. It is another step in a direction that they started going with Magma. And while I can understand why some people are kind of not with it because they are straying or moving further away from the more death metal, overtly aggressive roots, Gojira still has a way to be incredibly heavy, even if it's not a traditionally heavy, heavy characteristics in a song. I think a lot of that has to do with the things that Gojira brought to death metal and heavy metal, and how they, the different elements they would bring and all that. Those things that we enjoyed so much, those new elements, those are what they're leaning into with this new album, and how they started to lean into with Magma. Shorter songs, more concise songs, more atmosphere. But that doesn't mean they can't get heavy. It's kind of funny because I've listened to a ton of this really low, down-tuned, super aggressive, just heavy metal, and Gojira, they tune down, but they tune down like one step. So, one, note lower than standard. And there's bands that are doing like 3-4 note, a whole octave down from standard. But, as the kids say, when Gojira goes into a chug or, any type of gallop type riff, it just hits different, they have an intensity to what they do. There's a ton of amazing songs on this album. From the opener, Born for One Thing, which I think is probably the most accessible song on the album. It's the most like, other songs from Magma. It's just got crushing riffs, amazing drumming, totally, Gojira style choruses and stuff. It's like a perfect Gojira song. Almost like Silvera from Magma is like a perfect Gojira song. They also have another amazing track called Into the Storm, which has that gallop riff I mentioned. It's just a simple riff, but yeah, it's just, when Gojira does it, it's just like damn, all right. There is a really cool song called The Chant. It kind of reminds me of, I think it was The Cell or Shooting Star from Magma. People have kind of compared Gojira a lot to Metallica in that, they have this very loyal fan base and they've just been growing year after year after year. Now, obviously, at this point in Metallica's career, they were, they had the Black Album and they were, ruling the rock world. Obviously, the world's not set up for that to be the case for Gojira. But I see where the similarities come. They start off really aggressive and raw, and slowly more elements are coming in. They're pushing in different directions, and you can kind of look at Magma as their kind of Black Album, where things were stripped down a bit more emphasis on melody and texture. And I saw someone kind of mention this as kind of like a load reload era. And as much as I love Metallica and I love those albums, I wouldn't make that direct comparison. I think this isn't Gojira doing something wildly different than what they normally do. They're just pushing the elements they've already had in their music for years and years and years. They're just leaning on those elements more than just the straightforward metal style stuff. And it doesn't, it's buoyed by the fact that they're just amazing musicians. And, Christian and Joe and Mario. And I'm blanking on the bass player's name. I can go look it up right now, but I think it's Jean. They're just amazing musicians, and they each bring something unique and just different. So, yeah, I think it works at an entirely different level than like a load-reload comparison. So, if you can't guess, Born, for one thing, is my favorite track. It's the opening track, but Into the Storm is also like a really close second, with Amazonia being a really close third to that second. So, I'm just going to kind of pull one out of the hat to pick as a taste for you. So, let's see what we got here. And there we go. Okay. Here we go. We're going to go with a little bit of Amazonia. Gojira, Fortitude, amazing album. Check it out. To our guests, and you heard me right, guests, multiple. Today I have the awesome team behind Insymmetry Creations, Matt Knowles and Stephanie Cannon. I wasn't familiar with this duo prior to Matt reaching out on Facebook and, kind of mentioning that this is, Comics Coffee Metal's right up their alley. And after I checked into them, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've seen them around at shows or something like that, because some of the imagery and stuff they have is really striking. And then I dug a little deeper. Well, not very deep, because it's all front and center, but I saw that they also produce like their own heavy metal albums for their series, and I'm like, how the hell did I not know about this already? How the hell was I not all up in this and familiar and just jamming this stuff? And it's really great stuff. It's really well done, kind of, you know, folkish storytelling metal, and it's just very well done. We get into a bit of that, talking about how they make it and all that, and it was just a really great chat, talking to Matt and Stephanie. And there's a little bit of a technical glitch towards the end. Steph got kicked off the call, and, you know, unfortunately the whole file from her end, well, not from her end, but from the service I used to record, got corrupted. But thankfully, my backup caught her, so I was able to make sure she's still in the conversation. There's not weird pauses or gaps where she's speaking and there's no one, there's nothing there. So let that be a lesson to all of you. I almost didn't initiate my backup for this, so make sure you do that. Record your backups. I'll always have a fail-safe, because, you know, the internet sucks. So, but it was a really great chat. We talk about, you know, making comics, making metal, a ton of coffee talk. They got quite a story going on with their Heirs of Isildur, and they have an awesome Kickstarter. It's, as this post today, they have about a week left. So, you know, there's a link in the show notes. I highly recommend you go check it out. It looks like a lot of fun. The book they're doing is very much, while they've had stories beforehand, this is very much a catch everybody up here, you know, while telling, you know, a complete story and setting things up for the future. So, you know, I haven't read any of their stuff before. I'm excited to check this out. I like that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, you don't need to read the volumes previous. You can read this, get caught up on the story, and then, you know, jump into where it's going next. But in their Kickstarter, as Matt will explain, they have a ton of awesome tiers and stuff for people to catch up and stuff like that. So, yeah. Insymmetry Creations, they're doing some really cool stuff. Really glad I got a chance to talk to them. They'll definitely be back on the show before we know it. They're very prolific, and the music's awesome too. So I'm really excited to check that out. So yeah, let's get to it. Insymmetry Creations. All right, so in the span of the 39 now episodes of this show, I've had a few people promoting their Kickstarters, and I kind of have a streak going on right now where everyone I get on, by the time they get on the show, they're already funded. And I'm happy that this is still the case, because now we can just have a nice relaxed chat about all the awesome stuff that Insymmetry Creations is doing. But before we get to all of that, I have to ask you both, comics, coffee, metal, what are you guys digging right now?
Hey, how you doing? This is Matt Knowles. Let's see. So when it comes to, I'm going to start off with metal. For me, I am digging the new Stortregen album. That is Stortregen. They are on the Artisan era. Ridiculously good tech metal album. And right now, that's one of my, on the top of my list in consideration for top albums of 2021. We try to make sure we do a top albums of the year article at the end of every year. That's something we do at Insymmetry Creations. Cool. We'll do some, comics that we liked, music that we liked, movies we liked. We did one 2 years ago, movies that we really thought were the worst that we've ever seen. Just kind of those things that just happened. But yeah, the Smooth Stortregen album is something that is I'm loving. And for me, I'm loving black coffee. Anything that is caffeinated that will keep me awake. To me, coffee tastes gross. So if I can drink some coffee that has a caffeine content in there, I'm totally down with it. Other than if it's not that or vanilla bean from Starbucks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And comics wise, I'm just totally down and looking at really good comics that are on Kickstarter right now. Mike Tenner does some great stuff like Black Jackets and Midnight Highway. I think he's got a good pulse for stuff that's really good, Really happy by the time it'll be about a week from now when this thing airs, but really happy for our friend Madeline Holly Rosing, who just had a record-breaking campaign for herself on Boston Metaphysical Society. So that's me covering those three things. I'll shovel it over to the other person that has not introduced herself yet and let her introduce herself and talk about what she's into. So other person, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Steph Cannon, and let's see here. So metal, again, on the Artisan Era, our good friends in Fairy and also Equipoise. I'm really digging. I'm kind of a baby metalhead. I've only really been into metal since Matt introduced it to me over into the last few years. Wasn't that I didn't like it before, it was just that I had zero exposure to it. So all metal bands are new to me right now, which is kind of fun to see. I don't know, it's just fun to discover something new for the first time. And I'm digging almost everything that I'm hearing.
Awesome.
Coffee, I am a huge coffee addict. I definitely don't drink just black coffee. If I'm at Matt's, then I'm like, we have to go to the store and get creamer. I'm in California, and we got a couple of Dutch Brothers, which is, I don't think they're on the East Coast at all. They're like Utah, Colorado, California, Oregon based, a lot of those kinds of states. But I'm kind of digging their coffee. I'm a Starbucks loyalist. I'll never cheat on my Starbucks, but they're kind of a fun, and it's just crazy. They just keep building more in my city because everyone's going crazy for them. And they've got like a really cool vibe. I mean, there's memes about them that their customer service is up there. I mean, they're just like, you pull up to the window to get your drink and they're blasting music and they're dancing and they're just total hippies, and just, it's great. It's awesome. They're like top-notch customer service. That makes me want to keep going to them. That's comics, awesome. Sadly, my to-read pile is very high because we're working on our own comics.
That's how it goes, right? That's how it goes.
I really dig a lot of what Vault is putting out these days, though. They're great. So, and I have a lot of friends that are signed to them.
Yeah, Vault's really like just kind of becoming one of those like almost prestige publishers with just the I haven't read everything they put out, but everything I have read that they put out has just been like, yeah, this is amazing.
It's
like
top notch. Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of interesting you say that you just got into metal and all that, and there's like so much to discover, because I consider myself pretty well versed in metal and in comics, just different genres, different whatever. And I've said this many times before in the podcast, metal itself is almost like its own entire music medium, because you can say I listen to metal, and that could mean some melodeath band like Flesh God Apocalypse, or it could mean you listen to like The Sword or Ghost, or just these, or something like Amaranth or Nightwish and Epica, just this whole gamut of just entirely different things. So I'm still discovering things, and one of the boons of this show is again, I think I know a lot of bands, and I think I at least know of a lot of bands, but more often than not, someone's like, this is the band I'm really digging right now, and I have no idea who these people are, and now I have a new thing to go check out.
It's kind of funny because Matt, it's the type of music that Matt does. He loves his blast beat. It's heavy, but his taste in metal varies so wildly from that to like folk, like Norwegian folk metal. The best way that I like to describe it to people is, imagine you were at a Ren Fair or Oktoberfest and you're walking around and there is a little band there playing, but they were playing metal with their accordions and their flutes. But
folk metal's awesome, yeah.
And if you were to look at Matt and I, he is 6'3" and I'm like 5'1". And I'm like smiling, and he's got this beard. But he listens to that kind of stuff, and I'm like, I want my doom metal. I want my black metal.
Yeah, she's like, don't put all those other things in there. Just give me my normal guitars, drums, and
I don't want no dang flute in my metal music.
Now, Don, I gotta say this right off the bat. You earned about 50 plus points with me, because the very first band you mentioned when you talked about metal was mentioning Flesh God Apocalypse, and I'm like, all right, Donna's cool. We can keep it.
Well, I'm I'm a relatively new convert to the more guttural vocal style and things like that. And I say relatively, a few years. I've been into it for a few years. It took me a while. And of course, the music I make now, I do that style.
Yeah.
Nice.
Have you ever seen Flesh God live?
No, unfortunately, I have not. I was never much of a concert goer.
So
but,
let me tell you a little story about
I know
Flesh
they're
God
insane.
Apocalypse. Let me tell you a little story about Flesh God Apocalypse. So I have a good friend of mine who I've known for many, many years who is does merchandise. She's one of the best merch people in the metal industry. Her name is Melanie. And she's from Europe. She's from Switzerland. And I met her when my old band did a tour of Europe with Elovite on their very first tour that they ever did. And whenever Melanie's in the States, she's like, "Hey, I'm going to be on this tour. Let me know if you want to come see this band when I'm down in Tampa or Orlando, and I'll put you on the list." Sure, no problem, because she knows that I will turn around and put that money back into the band merch and whatnot. So I went to go see Arsis was on the tour and Winter Sun. Those were who I went to go see, was Arsis and Winter Sun. And I was talking to her before the show, and I'm like, "So who's your favorite band on the tour?" She's like, "Matt, I know who you're into. You're going to like Flesh God Apocalypse. You're going to freak out." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Talked to a couple of my buddies, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to freak out. I know what you're into. You're going to freak out when you hear this band Flesh God Apocalypse." So Arsis got done. Flesh God was going to set up, and they have these two guys in these hoodies zipped all the way up looking like Kenny from South Park. And they're setting everything up, and they wheel this piano out there all distressed looking and kind of facing at a 45-degree angle towards the audience. And I'm like, whoa, like this guy's going to pretty much kick some ass up here, or he's setting himself up for an embarrassment to be facing the audience with that thing. So they got the whole stage set up. The two guys are out there in the hoodies, take off their hoodies, and it was one of the guitar players and the drummer, it was the drummer and the keyboard player that were already in their full distressed corpse paint and with tuxes and everything. And from the second that they started to come on the stage until the second they left the stage, they were all completely in character. I completely fangirled out. I was like sending clips back to my wife, and I'm going, "Ah, ah," like turning the camera to the stage, and all you can hear is like this on the on the audio. But I completely lost my mind over Flesh God Apocalypse live, and my family was subjected to all of their albums nearly nonstop every time we go anywhere for like the next year. It was nonstop Flesh God, because I was so blown away by how they performed on stage. They sold me more than any other band has ever sold me on stage at that show. This was right when they released Labyrinth, which was to me one of the top metal albums of all time.
Nice. Yeah, when Veleno came out, that's when I first took notice of them, and I was like, whoa, this is my jam. Like, this is really, again, there's so many different labels you can attach to different bands, and I think at the time this was like groove death or something like that, someone called it, or mellow death. And I'm like, I don't care what it is, it's awesome. Like, these guys just, they get it. And then the fact that when you get their album or whatever, they have instrumental versions too. So it's like, my family won't, I won't win that war. Like, okay, we're gonna listen to this. My kids are gonna be like, no, no, Dad, turn it off.
Yeah, they've got I've seen some of the trackings that they've done, and I have like 64 tracks of just orchestra on their stuff, and you're like, dude, how are you gonna hear all that, man? But that's how it sounds so enormous, is because they're tracking at like incredible levels. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the band Ice Nine Kills, but
I've heard of them. I'm pretty sure I've heard them before. I'm not overly familiar with them.
So if you look up the band Ice Nine Kills, they're in the mainstream of that style market in the US. But the keyboard player for Flesh God Apocalypse was actually contracted to do the keyboards on one song for Ice Nine Kills, which is the song called Me, Myself, and Hyde. So you should probably go look up that song from Ice Nine Kills, and there's their version of it, and then he also has the orchestral version of his parts of that song. And hearing the two, you'd be like, wow, I can't believe that this thing here is what's in this. I hate calling them commercial, but just in the popular American metal market. But
Yeah.
it was a pretty impressive song, and that actually is what kind of got me into Ice Nine Kills for a little bit, was because he was able to play on that song, and it kind of opened the door there.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to check them out. I see them pop up a lot. I watch a lot of metal YouTube stuff, and they kind of, their name shows up a lot. Ice Nine Kills, with just the whatever lists people do, like riff lists and stuff like that. And so yeah, I'll have to check that out, because I think Flesh God just, they kind of opened the door for me for a lot of other bands of that ilk, because it's just so good. It's like it just kind of like it unlocked those little doors within me. Where like, oh, okay, I do like this kind of stuff. Let me find some more like this. And thankfully, there's enough algorithms in all the streaming services that they get pretty good. They get pretty close to if you say you like something, that they find something else that you're gonna dig on too. But
big time.
Yeah, it's my. But like I was saying, there's just such a wide berth of this stuff, and when you contacted me about being on the show, I'm like, okay, cool. I checked it out. I'm like, well, I like the aesthetic of what you guys are doing, and then I'm like realizing, oh, you're making music, and then I saw you had a video that was kind of like an animated comic style video.
It's probably for Lovelorn Betrayal.
Yes, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, because I had started making a soundtrack for my first book in 2014, and at the time, it was hard to find other people doing the same thing. Not that other people weren't, because I was inspired by a few people who did their own soundtracks for their own books. But it was just like, over the ensuing years, I'm just like, why aren't people doing this more? This is so fun. Like, this is such a cool tie-in to comics, like, just especially with metal and all that. So now that I'm coming across, and I see you all have been doing it for years, which is awesome, because you have like a nice catalog. You have a previous album, now you have the second album, which you guys are currently finishing up, and it was just such a great find, which is I wouldn't have been able to find. I wouldn't have probably come across until later, or some other way, if I didn't have the podcast, and you're like, hey, Comics Coffee Metal, this is up my alley, let's we got a Kickstarter, let's try to do this. So yeah, it's just hearing the stuff you guys do it's really cool, because it's really well done. It's like, there's one thing where it's like, I make my own music, and I've cut a lot of teeth recording, and I would not consider what I do at a pro level in terms of like sound. I get pretty good with some of the stuff I do now, but hearing your stuff, I'm like, this just sounds like a label paid for, professionally recorded, mixed, mastered. The songs are well constructed. It's just nice epic metal. Like, what genre would you think that the style of metal you do for your books is under? Because I would think something more like, maybe like a power metal, I would think, but I'm probably not. Power metal kind of like probably brings to mind more like a more falsetto-y type singing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say more just European melodic metal. I would say something that probably
that makes more sense.
Probably is closer to the Swedish sound or the Finnish sound. That being said, I do think it's kind of hard to just put it in one box, because especially on the first album, Corey Steger did do a lot of power metal vocals for us. We had a female vocalist that came in, and we do like to have a lot of very melodic guitar solos on there with a lot of feel. Even guys that are like super tech metal guys, like Zach Leeser, who is on here, the solos he did have a more to him, because in his stuff he's normally going 800 million miles, and he was able to like put a little more feel into what he does. And so there's a lot of stuff. We just want to make sure that what we do is memorable and catchy. And I could let Steph talk about that too, because when Steph and I first started working together, before we started working together, I was already doing the metal, she was doing comics, and I was trying to take what I was doing and move it from being an illustrated novel and an ebook into comics. And I had the first 2 issues of Heirs of Isildur out, and she was able to hear some of the music and the comics at that point, and it was really cool being able to hear her response as a fan. So like I said, I could hand that over to Steph and let her, as a fan of what we were doing and then becoming a part of what we're doing, kind of let her, share her side of that.
So when I met Matt, he had 2 issues out of Heirs of Isildur at the time, I believe, and it's a 11 issue arc for the first story arc. And we had talked, and he had sent me the first 2 issues, and I read them, and I had never seen anything. I had never read a comic where there was an accompanying music in that way. I had seen other comics that had a soundtrack, a playlist that you could listen to while you listen to it, but or read
Mm-hmm.
it, but it wasn't necessarily music that was created by the person who created the comic. And so that was my first time ever seeing anything like that, where I'd be reading the issue and it would say, to learn more about this character, go to this, YouTube channel and check out this song.
Yeah, I thank you for doing the segue because I was just about to ask, how did you two, come together and, form this partnership? And also, when I always have a lot of questions when it comes to people who are in a writing partnership and the relationship between, I guess, the workload or anything like that. Is there something with the, with your creative process? Is there usually one person instigates a plot or an idea and then the other person's like, okay, well, let's kick it back and forth? Or is it you guys kind of just throw everything in a pot and then kind of decide, who's going to tackle what, kind of like a showrunner would do for a writer's room where they all kind of break the story and then they, select people to do certain episodes and stuff like that. How is your working relationship kind of broken up between, the writing and all that?
So I think one of the things that's really good about us is that we tried to look at it from the standpoint of all we are concerned about is getting the project done and getting it done in the best way possible. We're not as much concerned about, we always say everything we do is 100% 50-50, knowing that that doesn't mean that when you read something we do that that 50% of the words were typed onto the script by me and 50% were typed on by Steph. That's just not realistic. We like to say that there's always going to be somebody in the driver's seat and somebody in the passenger seat, but if the person in the passenger seat doesn't mean that they're unimportant, because they may be the one that holds the roadmap to tell you where you're driving the car. And so both aspects have a symbiotic relationship. Just today we were working on a script, and it's one that's pretty complicated script, and I had a briefcase basically, full of ideas for what I wanted to do in this story for a long time. Some of them before Steph and I even met. But just because I have ideas doesn't mean that they're in a coherent story form. And when she and I have worked back and forth on these ideas for a long time, and there are some things that I originally had in the script, and she was like, "This thing here is not, it's not hitting me. It's not something that is, it's not something that I'm feeling, and I feel like if we try to force this into the story, we're just going to kind of take it off onto a tangent that doesn't need to be there. There's already so much other powerful stuff in here." So sometimes one person's role is just helping to get the other person back on track and help to knock off the rust on the other edges. Sometimes it's, one person's going to write and the other person is going to be more the editor and make sure that the story is crafted the way it needs to be done. Steph does some writing for creepykingdom.com where she does a lot of movie reviews, and that doesn't have anything to do with me writing. Steph writes those things completely top to bottom, but then she'll send them to me just so I can look it over with the editorial eye to make sure that there's, to see if maybe that, maybe this thought has been put in here a couple times. We can cut out a couple of the sentences and still be strong. There could be additional words that can be taken out. Try to make sure that this review has got a unique perspective in comparison to previous reviews. So I want to make sure that this review doesn't have the same review as one that was done, or the same the same leading phrase as one that was done 5 times ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we always try to have that kind of relationship where it's, two sets of eyes are better than one. There are some times where it may be Steph that's got the vibe on where we want to go on a concept. Sometimes, we're working on a kid's story right now, G-rated story, where we just kind of barfed out a couple of ideas into the air and to see what kind of concepts were going to be good, and then we just kind of fleshed it out from there. I mean, we don't normally, and Steph, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we normally are as concerned about, well, in this story I had 2 ideas and Steph only had 1, or I had 12 and Steph had 6. We're just like, hey, the story is done. Is it the best it can be? Can we get it, either published or printed up or onto Kickstarter ourselves? And if it's the best it can be, that's what we're concerned about, because our thing is we want to create characters people can relate to and universes people want to escape into. And if we do that, the people on the outside are not going to care which pieces came from me and which pieces came from Steph. They're just going to care, is that a good story or not?
No, that's great to hear, because I've known of some folks who tried partnering with other people, and it becomes that, and that's just not a tenable situation to work under. It falls apart very quickly. And I've been lucky enough as an artist to work with writers who, if I'm like, who first off, they start off saying like, hey, you got a way of doing this differently, you got an idea, let's hear it, let's do the best thing possible. Which, I think just fosters more trust between everybody and creates a truly better product, because you're getting more points of view, more just more than just one person's opinion or experiences helping craft this story. Now, when you work with artists, do you typically give them like a full script, or are they involved in the kind of the creative process, or is it kind of you give them a full script and obviously them being the visual aspect of it, they'll have their say of like, oh, I think this shot would work better here or something like that? Is that kind of how that works, or is it more of a, here's the script, because you guys put time and all this work into it, so it's kind of like easy job for the artist to just draw the script, or is it something that they kind of come on and also help form the vision of?
Matt is a big proponent of Google Docs and Google Sheets. I think anytime we talk about the scripting process, he is going to mention that. It was a learning curve for me. It's still a learning curve 3 years later, but it allows us to share something with an artist. And a lot of the artists that we work with are overseas. They're not from the US. We've worked with artists in Guatemala, the Philippines, Brazil. So we need something that's seamless and easy. And that allows us to have a shared document that we can just throw up a link and the artist can click on it and we have it broken down. It's a very different way of doing scripting, but it works for an artist who can look at it and go, okay, here's the panel, here's what they're wanting, which of course is typical for comic scripting. But it's a much simpler way to share something with somebody. And we on the back end, we use Google Docs and Google Sheets for keeping track of the dates that we get art back and the dates that we've paid artists and those types of things. So as far as we're writing the script, but there are times where an artist will come back and say, hey, this page, it's going to be really difficult to do what you're wanting here. What if we did it this way? And there's usually a little bit of discussion that goes on. And we know they're the professionals. They're the ones that know artistically how something's going to work. And there are times when we say, well, this is really the vision that we had for it. But there are also times when we say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and try that. And it does work.
Cool. Yeah, that's one of the good things about technology. I've really tried to lean into the whole Google Doc thing, especially as I'm starting to write my own stuff. Like, it's a very easy platform just to kind of share with people and do that. And it's, as an artist, it's always great to hear, when artists can have that kind of, trust in telling the story and all that. Because, again, I've been fortunate. I haven't had anyone who's been, like, militant about their script. So, and not that it's ever a bad thing if someone's militant about it, but it's just, it's a whole creative process, and it's a living thing, you know. So it's gonna change just based on whose eyes are on it and how things are dictated and things like that. So that's really cool to hear.
Well, one of the things about that too is that you know, with we have to learn the artists as much as the artists have to learn us, because the last two artists that we worked with, one of them wanted to, you know, he's like, hey, I'd rather take this panel that's got, you know, a bunch of people talking and split it up into like 9 panels on the page so I can, like, you know, focus on each person's face. And so we started writing scripts where we would do that, where we would have a bunch of panels on a page. And the most recent artists we've worked with have been the other way around, where they're like, you got 6 panels on this page, this could be done in 4, and they do it in an amazing way. And so
yeah,
we kind of have to understand those artists stylistically as well, because the guy who does 9 panels would not be able to function if we forced him to do 4, and vice versa. As long as the story is still being told, and as long as what we are trying to accomplish with the page and from the plot is not getting lost in the art, then we're pretty much up for anything when it comes to what the artists want to try and contribute. We've had artists that have said, hey, what do you think about me doing this here? And it's been a great idea. Our entire Tales from Nocturnia series was unintentionally spawned by an artist doing a little something different on a panel that we didn't even expect. But what they did, it was a panel for Heirs of Isildur issue 6, and the panel that was in there's like a look into Tales from Nocturnia from Heirs of Isildur, and the panel just was something Steph and I just kept on going back to. And we're like, what is going through this executioner's head? What could they possibly be thinking? We just kept on finding ourselves going back there, and we're like, maybe we should write this other story and have this executioner be the main character. And next thing you know, we have a 3-issue miniseries that basically had 6 issues worth of content. It's going to be half of the album that we're doing right now, which is. Thanks a lot, man. And on behalf of Steph and Insymmetry Creations, thanks a lot for having us, and we'll see you guys next time. Doing their thing and being what we wanted them to be as an artist.
That's awesome. And, you know, I do have to give you all just the right amount of kudos and respect, because, you know, you mentioned you had 11 issues of Heirs of Isildur. You have the 3 issues of Tales of Nocturnia, and putting out that many comics independently is not. It's an incredibly difficult feat, and it sounds like you have the right mindset and the kind of ability to kind of like gather that kind of groundswell for what you're doing, and just seeing how you work with artists and things like that, because bringing up the whole how the artist works differently and all that's huge, you know, and giving artists to breathe like that. You know, it seems like a small thing where the artist is like, you know what, I want to break this up, you know, to see what seems like more work, but for that artist it's probably far less work and much more enjoyable, and you get a better product out of it. And just, you know, that, you know, in the cases that's been for me, like that just it creates such a better working experience and a better artistic creative experience when you can be that flexible. So I, you know, give you guys raise my glass to you guys for doing that, because that's an incredible thing you're doing. And
well, I appreciate that, definitely. And one of the things I will say too is kind of neat is that before Steph and I met, we both were already investing a large amount of our own money into the projects we had. I had already saved up the budget for the album and the first 11 issues of Heirs of Isildur before I even started the project. Steph had done a large number of 1-page comics, 2-page comics, 5 pages, 8 pages. She even had started production on a graphic novel, and she had saved up an enormous amount of funds on her side. And before we met, both of us really didn't care how much money we spent on the projects. We just wanted to get them done. And I think that the two of us coming together and deciding that we were going to work together probably helped us both out, because we both realized, hey, we have a responsibility to the other person to be more fiscally responsible and understand what the overall cost of what we're doing is. We did a show 2 years ago, and we were driving home, and we were just like, this isn't going to cut it. We were like, if we just to break even on what we were doing, we would have had to have sold like something like 958 copies of a single issue of
Oof.
one of the Heirs of Isildur issues if we were just funding it ourselves, releasing it ourselves, hoping for people to do pre-orders, hoping to go to shows, and that didn't account for hotel stays or table fees or
Nope.
anything like that. And Steph had mentioned before, she's like, you know what, I might just kickstart something. And then it was like, no, I definitely don't want to kickstart anything. And I might kickstart it. I definitely don't want to kickstart something because it's going to be too much for one person to handle. And she go back and forth and back and forth. And after that conversation we had, we were just like, you know what, we have to be kickstarting projects. We have to be looking at that as another revenue source, because just thinking you're going to be able to go to shows and shill $5 comics or $15 or $20 variants just wasn't going to do it. And she took something that she was not really too fond of considering, which was doing Kickstarters, and the same thing for me. And we kind of put that fear aside, and we researched it, and took about 6 months to do a lot of research. When I say we took about 6 months, I'm going to say Steph did about 5.5 months of that research for us. And that was the basis of us starting our Kickstarter journey. And we feel like where we're at business wise now is definitely on the right track. And Steph would agree to this too, where we see ourselves right now. We're still on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to our Kickstarter campaigns, but we know where we were 2 years ago when we started. And we are definitely at that next level right now. Like, we are probably like one step up the totem pole, and there are people that are just starting just like where we were, that we're able to kind of help them out now, which is kind of cool. The things that the people that we looked up to when we started are similar to what we're doing now. And we're like, holy crap, we funded in 40 minutes on our Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, that's
and
nuts.
we were like, wow, we can't even believe that. Who would have imagined? And we didn't have a $50 amount there. We put it in for $3,500 because we have vinyl records and stuff.
Mhm.
We didn't know if people wanted to do that. We're like, man, in 40 minutes people had us funded. And that's what the people we looked up to, Charlie Stickney and Russell Nolte and Madeline Holly Rosing, and the people that helped us out when we started. So now we're like, wow, we really need to make sure that we're paying it forward to the next generation of creators, to make sure that they are getting that information from us that we had people give to us.
That's awesome. And just looking at your Kickstarter, it's incredibly well done. It's incredibly professional looking, and you obviously know what you're doing. There seems, and the fact that you blew through your goal in 40 minutes is just mind-boggling. And it's it was a good goal too, because there's people just starting out and they're like, okay, they're factoring out, I made the mistake, where I'm thinking, we're kickstarting our book. I went for a hardcover, all this stuff that just skyrockets the price for everything. And, we, raised a good deal of money, but it was nowhere near what the budget was for what we wanted to do. So we definitely overshot and, had to lick our wounds on that. But, you definitely have, when I look at your Kickstarter, I see smart people. You have a ton of awesome rewards. You have vinyls. You offer digital, and which is mind-boggling to me when people don't offer digital options for their Kickstarter, because it's such an easy $5 to $10 get for people who wouldn't normally back you on something because they only read digitally. Or like I've backed so many more Kickstarters now whenever I see they have like a $5 to $10 to $15 digital option based on the size of the book and all that.
Oh yeah, well, and it's difficult too when indie comics we always say it's a small pool, but everybody knows everybody, and we have a lot of friends in the industry that we want to support. And when when you have 6-7 friends all doing a Kickstarter in 1 month, it gets tough. So sometimes you have to go digital, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a big proponent. There's some your purists that say no, you have to have, I want to actually hold it in my hands, hold the book in my hands. And that's great. But, there's only so much shelf space and money to go around. And if you want to support somebody, hey, if, rather than buy a digital PDF from us, then nothing at all.
Well, and
Yeah,
then
it's
people overseas as well. I mean, overseas
Mhm.
shipping is out of control right now,
Oh yeah.
and I mean, I've got friends that are overseas that do things, and I'm like, I can't afford to pay $37 in shipping. I look
Nope.
at it from a very pragmatic perspective. If we were to pay $37 in shipping to get the physical copy, that's $37 that is not going into any creator's hands. That's
Mm-mm.
$37 that's going into the postal service. So Steph and I are like, we would much rather get the digital from that guy and then take that $37 and go push that out to some other creators. So that way it's staying in the creative community, not in the postal service community
Yeah.
or FedEx's pockets.
And
Yeah.
essentially creating more work for that person to have to pack it, ship it, make sure it gets out, and international shipping being what it is, potentially getting lost, and
Exactly.
whatever drama that would happen with that. It's just digital is there's a time last year, I want to say middle of fall last year, where it seemed like everywhere I turned, a friend or somebody else had like an awesome Kickstarter. I'm like, well, thank God I have the digital options because I can't back all of these. But for $5 to $10, I can get all of you. I can support you, and I can get some awesome stuff in return.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's the Kickstarter you have is it's just really well put together. I was very impressed. Not that I expected any less when I first checked you guys out and saw your website and all that, but just seeing the level of professionalism brought over to the Kickstarter as well. And it sounds like Steph is mostly responsible for helping craft that and all that. So it's just it's just awesome to come across new things that I'm pretty sure I've seen your guys' stuff around. I could not have, considering the circles and followers on social media that we kind of share and all that. But I'm really glad that I've been able to get a deeper dive into what you're doing, because it's really up my alley and it's something I'm really interested in. And I at the beginning of the show, before we started, I talked a little bit about your Kickstarter and all that. But if you could let everybody know a little more in depth about what Heirs of Isildur is and Tales of Nocturnia, and how they potentially tie together and why they're fighting. Why is there a versus?
Take this stuff. You want me to take it?
So, Heirs of Isildur is the steampunk time travel series that Matt started, and when I came aboard, I served as kind of editor and story consultant for it. And the first story arc, as we said earlier, was 11 issues. Tales from Nocturnia is our medieval fantasy series that we have that spins off from Heirs, kind of like what we talked about earlier as well. And that was fully co-written by Matt and I by the time that came out. And we knew that we wanted to. So when the first story arc for Heirs ended, which was called The Crossroads Conundrum, our main character, Michael Isildur, his fate was kind of left unknown. People didn't know whether he was alive or dead or what was going on. It was very inconspicuous on purpose. We knew that there was going to be another story arc that was going to happen. But then we started writing Tales from Nocturnia. So fans of Heirs kept telling us, hey, when are we going to find out? When are we, you left us hanging, it was a cliffhanger in a good way. And we said, we want to tell people, we want to get started on this next story arc for Heirs. Matt had a whole idea for the sequel. And we wanted to let people know kind of what was happening with Michael in this kind of in-between stage. So we call it a bridge issue. It's a one-shot. It's a bridge issue called The Nightmare Scenario that is going to answer all of those questions for fans, but it's going to do so in a way that when we jump into our next story arc, which is titled The Perilous Prospects, we can jump right in. We don't have to do this big, long kind of expositional story about what happened with Michael. It's just kind of easier to do this as a comic and give people the answers that they need and not make them wait any longer. The album that's associated with it, we're calling Heirs of Isildur versus Tales from Nocturnia, because there are 5 songs that are associated with Heirs and there are 5 songs that are associated with Tales from Nocturnia. And we thought it would be really fun to do a cover that showed them in this Marvel versus Capcom style fighting, battle royale type of thing. So the characters themselves aren't necessarily battling in the issue, but we wanted to show that both IPs were reflected with the songs on the album.
That's really cool. And I think it's a great idea to just have like this bridge in between these, epic storylines that you're crafting.
And one of the reasons why we did that, was because there are questions that need to be answered at the end of the Crossroads Conundrum. And it's a very important piece of the puzzle, but it was probably the only piece of the puzzle that we could pull out of what's going to be in the Perilous Prospects, which is the sequel arc, that we could tell as a one-shot story that could be told in a way that is fun. When we say fun, we don't mean fun like yippity-doo-dah, we're going to the carnival. We mean fun like where people are going to read it and going to be like, these people have crafted some ridiculous craziness here. This is a crazy adventure, and I got myself a story right here. I don't need to know what happened before. I don't need to know what's coming after. I can enjoy this thing. I can understand that something happened to this guy in this nightmare scenario. They understand the players that are going to be involved when it comes to the Perilous Prospect, and we can just jump right into the Perilous Prospects. And that was something that was important to us, because we wanted to make sure when the Perilous Prospect starts that the groundwork was laid and that people did not have to worry about getting the first half of the issue being, let's just kind of rehash what was in the Crossroads Conundrum. We could just jump right in, have all that stuff taken care of a nightmare scenario, and we're good to go.
That's a really smart idea. I like that a lot. That's, especially you don't have to know before, you kind of get all the information you need. That's, one of the great things about comics, that's, when, growing up, when you're reading comics, occasionally you would have those issues, right? The kind of the reset, not really not a reboot, just a one and done kind of story that just tells you everything you need to know about the characters. So then you can like start wanting to hunt the back issues to find out more details about some of these things, and then look forward to what's coming next. So I think that's a really cool idea that you guys are doing, and just the split album. I'm all for that, and I want to start asking Matt some nerdy recording questions. So bear with me while I go through. So Matt, you record mainly at home, or do you go to a studio?
I have a studio built at my house.
Oh, okay. Is recording something you do? Like, is that kind of a regular gig for you, or is that just you built the studio to make your music?
Just definitely to make my own music. I feel like there are certain aspects of recording that I do well, but it's more like I do the right. I can construct a song well in that respect. From a playing perspective, from an auditory perspective, I think it's a little bit different there. We do have a mix engineer that does assist us, and we do have a mastering engineer where we do send the songs off for mastering, because just like with writing, how Steph and I make sure that anything we write, we bounce it off of each other to make sure that we've covered everything. I don't think that one person should be doing everything when it comes to recording. There needs to be other ears, especially in those later aspects of the recording process, to be able to make sure that all the tracks are in the right spot, that the audio is all the frequencies are where they need to be on the mastering. And we've got a couple of really good guys that are working with us to help make sure that the sound is how it should be once everything has been recorded.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's because it definitely shows in the end product, because like I said, it sounds but it sounds, it's got that professional level of sheen on it, I would say, where you can tell that, people who knew what they were doing handled all the audio in this, and it sounds great. All the stuff I've heard, just, the mixes sound great. And so you mainly record the rhythm parts. Like, so what's your axe of choice?
So I've got a Schecter 8-string.
Okay.
And I've got bare knuckle juggernauts in the guitar. Those are actually recommended by Corey. So Corey Steger, who was the other musician that worked really in depth with us on this project. But it's a Schecter Diamond Series 8-string that's got It's in drop E, so I've got a whole extra octave
Ooh.
on my guitar for the heavier chords and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got two bare knuckle juggernauts in there, which the pickups actually cost more than the guitar did. So
That's how it is these days, though. The pickups,
yeah.
it's insane. But it's also kind of worth it.
So that is definitely my axe of choice. I've got a mic, Audio-Technica mic, but it's inside a Chaotica eyeball. I'm not sure if you've ever looked at what Chaotica eyeballs are, but they are a. If you look it up, it starts with a K, so it's Chaotica but spelled with a K. They're designed to mimic audio recording booths, and a lot of studios will have them now. And when they first started becoming a rage, there were some testimonials of people being like, "I spent $5,000 on my vocal booth, and now I use it for storage because everybody records on Chaotica eyeballs." It's just like a $200 styrofoam mesh ball that goes over top of your mic and deadens the room sounds. So it doesn't matter if I'm recording in my garage studio or if I was to take the mic out in the living room, you're going to get basically the same sound.
I just, checked my phone, looked that out. I've never seen these before, but it looks incredibly cool. It looks good. The red one looks really evil, and it's like, I kind of need this just aesthetically. Just hang it in my room. So what kind of do you use amp sims, or do you record live amps, or kind of mix both?
Oh, absolutely amp sims. I record. I use Reaper as my DAW, and then I've got Reaper as my DAW. And I always tell people, if you're gonna spend money on recording, why go spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on your DAW? Get Reaper, that's very inexpensive, and then spend all that money on drum kit from hell and East West sounds and 8 Dio patches in and contacts complete, so you have all your orchestra banks and bass banks. And I've got Joey Sturgis tones. My buddy Azrim, who was a former bandmate of mine, he's also in the band at Manifest on the Artisan era. He set me up some amp sims, and then used some Joey Sturgis tone amp sims, as well as Joey Sturgis tones for bus glue for the different buses on the in the sessions. But that's basically about what I use. But I really love to find really cool keyboard sounds and just goof around on cool keyboard sounds and see if that inspires me to write something fun. The first video that we ever did for Heirs is for the song Shiver. And if you listen to that one, you hear there's a whole bunch of crazy spacey sounding keyboards in there. And I like using things like that because right off the bat, the song is going to have a more unique feel. It's kind of hard to make drums, guitar, and bass. Doesn't mean you can't make those things sound good, but it's hard to make those things sound unique and make them really have their own genre. But when you start adding in crazy keyboard sounds and keyboard patches and epic things like that, then right off the bat, the song is going to have a different, unique feel to it. At least that's how I feel.
I really love messing around with a lot of synths and stuff because there's so many, just even free, like so many awesome synths that just like can do so many crazy things, so many different things, and even ones that are, supposedly modeled after the same old school, synthesizer from the 80s. They sound different from each other and things like that. So it's really fun playing with that stuff and just kind of messing around, just pulling out the little keyboard and finding a cool sound and creating, crafting the drums and the bass and the guitar around that to create something different and new, as opposed to, starting from drums and guitar where, it's probably just going to be more riff heavy and, things like that.
Well, it's funny too, because there's even been some times when like I've sent Steph, because I'm in Florida and she's in California, and I might write something and send it over to her and ask her what she thinks, and she'll be like, "Hey, I really like that." And she's like, "My favorite part is the way that the song ends, how the keyboards kind of fade out." And I was like, "Oh, that was just me kind of leaving it because I didn't want to trim it off the MP3." And and she was like, "No, that sounds really cool. That's how that song ended up being. Like we actually used it in the song because she pressed for it." And she was like, "No, this actually sounds good." And I'm like, "Okay, let me develop it out a little bit more," because she was really adamant about it. And so that's how it stands.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear you use Reaper because that's what I use. I'm super happy with it. I've got it like 5 years ago, and I'm still getting regular updates for it. I think I only paid like $60 for it. It's
Reaper updates so much, it's absurd.
it's almost Adobe levels of annoyance with the updates, but I'm okay with it because I use the hell out of it, and I want it working the best it can be. I don't know if you've ever tried any of the Neural DSP amp sims. I recently checked out the Gojira one, and Gojira is
that'd be awesome.
That Gojira is one of my favorite bands, like period, and it's so good. It's so good. It's ridiculously good, and even just like a lot of the clean sounds and stuff, like just the weird sounds that they have for presets are just so awesome. I have that, and then I also have the STL Tones tonality Will Putney, which Will Putney's a metal producer, and he's done a ton of like heavy hardcore stuff, and that stuff is I was really impressed with that when I got that one. But there's a ton of free even plugins that are just ridiculous sounding. There's one called Emissary that's just it's not modeled after anything, it's its own thing, and it's just really, really awesome.
My big thing that I really like to do is getting the different drum kits. Like Drum Kit from Hell's got a lot of different plugins where you've got like the Meshuggah drummer that's gone in and just spent hours and hours and hours of doing drum hits, and they've had black metal drummers, all kinds of other drummers. So when you quote unquote programming your drums, you literally are just putting the MIDI sequences in there that are attaching back to real drummers actually having real audio wave samples in there of real drums. So that's why a lot of times nowadays you can't tell the difference between a real drummer and what's been quote unquote programmed, because you're literally attaching it to a real drummer's sound.
Yeah. I mean, there's if it's super quantized and on the 1 2 3 4 for everything, and the velocity on the MIDI is set to 127, it's all just pounded. You can kind of tell it's fake. But even then, with some types of metal, it's like, who cares? It still sounds good. So yeah, I use Easy Drummer. I love the Metal Machine kit. That one's really awesome. I like mixing it with another instance with something more like the their Levy kit, I think, which is the Led Zeppelin kit or whatever. Just because that's more open and airy, you kind of mix that in a little bit. And there's this company called Ugertone. I'm familiar with Ugertone. Yeah. So they had like really ridiculously cheap sales on their drum sets and all that, and their kind of aesthetic is like not the most pristine. It's like the Cult drums are intentionally kind of shitty sounding. They even have a preset after the Saint Anger drum sound, and so I've been experimenting with like kind of taking an instance of that and blending it in with the more polished Easy Drummer samples, and just kind of like seeing how those interact with each other and kind of like change the sound, because it's it's like blending guitar sounds and things like that, or making harmonies with vocals. Like you get something a little bit different, a little bit more your own when you just kind of experiment around. So with drums for me, what I like to do is I'm not as much concerned about the sound. What I'll do is I'll be like, you know what, I don't know if the fill that I want as a bassist is here in the metal kits. I'll go pull some jazz fill, and see if it's close. I mean, I'll still be going in there and fixing it and adjusting it on my own, but I'll go in there and I'll use that as a bass, just because a jazz drummer is going to think a little bit differently what they're going to do in their fills and in their rolls and whatnot, and their cymbal hits, than what a metal drummer would do. And so sometimes I'll try to pull some of those in and use those as a bass, because they're going to have just a different thought process. Yeah, it's I totally agree with that there. It's a lot of fun just kind of taking a preset MIDI thing and just like, okay, but tweaking it and making it fit the song, as opposed to just like slapping it on there and saying, okay, it's done. Sure, there's times where the a standard double bass drum pattern is just fine to be in a part, but when it gets to the fills or the stuff that's a little more intricate, it's real fun just kind of pulling something that you wouldn't think of, because you could program it yourself, program each hit, but you're not a jazz drummer, you're not a funk drummer, so finding something that was recorded by one of them, a groove that was made by them, and taking it and tweaking it a bit and making it fit into the metal project, that seems like a lot of fun, and that's certainly something that I know I've done a little bit here and there.
Well, one of the things that I will say is probably going to be one of the most significant recording sessions that I've had is something that just happened on March 6th of this past year. So by the time when this drops, it'll be about 2 months from the time that this drops. We mentioned Corey Steger earlier. Corey was a longtime friend of mine. He was a founding member of the band Under Oath. He is on every song on the first album, The Crossroads Conundrum. And he was all in to be a part of the new album. And Steph and I were super pumped about that. And he came down on March 6th and he had asked, he's like, hey, can my buddy Rick come down? Sure, Rick can come down. If you're cool with it, you think he's going to be a benefit to have in the recording studio, so to speak, that's fine. And I had told Steph, I'm like, hey, I know you obviously are not going to be here because you're in California, but I want you to be on video chat for as much of it as you can, because I wanted her to be involved in the sessions as much as anything. And so we started the recording session, and here's Rick and me and Corey, and Steph's on the video chat. And little did we know that Corey was going to pass away 11 days later. He got killed in a very tragic car accident that was 100% not his fault. He was just sitting at a light, but I digress. But that session was really neat because Steph was able to see some of the incredible intensity that came from working with someone like Corey. She got to see, because she's been in the studio with me recording, she's seen me record, and there's a certain intensity that comes from that. She's even gotten behind the mic, and Steph is actually, she has a couple of backing vocal spots across the album that's coming up. And there's just a different mentality that you have to have when you're doing that. And if you've not seen it before, I think sometimes you look at it and go, wow, is this just me? Is this person acting this way because of me? And then she got to see how it was when Corey and I would work together, and she was like, whoa, that's way more intense. He's kind of giving me he's given me a little bit of a pass. He's being nice to me the way that they're recording. But it was interesting. I was really glad she could experience that. And then when Corey passed away, which was 11 days after the session, Rick and Steph and I have kind of formed a bond. And, before we got on the broadcast, you talked about, we did a tribute cover for Corey. That was a joint combination of Steph, myself, and Rick Lobb, who's Corey's best friend, and then the artist James Sims. We knew what we wanted to do. I had thrown an idea at Steph, and she was like, hey, let's do it. Let's try it. We put it together, and Steph, we both looked at it, and like we said earlier, with the kind of editorial eyes, she had even, I think you, Steph, weren't you the first one? Was like, yeah, I don't think this looks as good as we thought on the original concept.
I don't remember.
Well, just put it this way. I know that we both looked at the original concept and we were like, maybe this will look okay when James tries to do it. We were going to have Corey with his guitars.
Oh, you're talking about the comic cover. I thought you were talking about the, okay. Yeah, that was definitely something where I was like, this seems cheesy and not what we wanted it to be.
Corey was known for like going through guitars like we go through glasses of water, or for this podcast, going through daily coffee. But we were originally going to have a picture of him with the guitars forming angel wings, and the concept sounded cool. But then when we looked at it as we were trying to Photoshop a concept piece together for James Sims, we're like, yeah, this is not going to work. So Steph and myself and Rick and James Sims all kind of had the idea at the same time of, what if we like made the Game of Thrones throne, but instead of it being the Game of Thrones throne made of swords, it was all made of Corey's guitar. And we went on an exhaustive research project to get pictures of every guitar that we had access to of Corey's, doing screenshots off of videos that were online, even back to 20 years ago when Under Oath had played some festivals. And we handed them to James, and I think James got between 7 and 10 of his guitars that he had played at some point actually built into the throne that's on the tribute cover on our Kickstarter campaign.
That's really cool. it's yeah, I remember when you had posted about that, and it's incredibly heavy thing to have happened, but I think what you guys are doing, and incorporating him so heavily, to honor his contributions to the previous album, and the work he was doing with this one. I think that's pretty cool. That's I think something that's very I guess personalizing, I guess, a little bit to the whole thing, because you have this big epic fantasy story. There's you think metal, big metal, but then you have this very human, tragic thing. But you're like, listen, this guy was such a huge part of the story of this book, the story of this current album. That it's it's nothing short of absolutely essential to make sure that he's honored because of his untimely passing, and he's represented, and so the fans know, who he is, even if they haven't heard of him before or under oath, and stuff like that, that they've, they get an idea, like, this person was hugely important to not only your personal life, but, working together and creating. So.
Well, yeah, and like I said, Steph had heard Corey's name more than any other person we'd worked with. We'd go to our shows, and people were like, "Oh, do you do all the music on this album?" And I'm like, "I do most of it." The other person that worked with me on the album was Corey Steger, one of the original members of Under Oath, and we sold quite a few CDs. I mean, when you say that stuff, we sold quite a few CDs just because people are like, oh, somebody from Under Oath was on here, man. I love Under Oath, and they would pick the CD up. And we knew as soon as he passed away, one of the first thoughts that went through my head was, holy crap, we have the last recorded tracks of this guy's life are sitting in our possession, and we have a responsibility to do the right thing. And as Steph said earlier, with Nightmare Scenario, our main character, Michael Isildur, is he alive? Is he perished? Or is he somewhere in between? The imagery for Nightmare Scenario internally is really dark. There's a lot of dark subject matters that are going on, a lot of wild, wacky things happening. But we had a bunch of ideas for variant covers that we just couldn't do. We're just like, yep, this great idea here. We can't do it this one over here because a lot of them were taking place in a graveyard. And we didn't feel it was going to be appropriate for us to be marketing a comic in any way that was using graveyard imagery, when we also had a tribute cover for Corey, and we have tributes for him inside the comic as well. We didn't want to be sending mixed messages in that respect.
Well, I completely understand, and actually and honestly really respect that choice. It's hard to deviate or nix a great idea or a great visual, but you're doing it for the right reasons. And I think hopefully that comes across for anyone who's listening, that it's incredibly important that you not only pay respect to your friend, but you have his last creative output in your hands. And
well, I think Steph would even say as well that wouldn't you agree, Steph? We had a bunch of really good ideas for potential covers, but I think we got probably one of the best covers we've ever had out of us ditching those and deciding to make a cover for him.
Absolutely. It comes from the heart a little bit more than some of our other covers have. Not to say that we didn't love our other covers. It's just that this was a much more profound background into how it was created.
No, it's definitely a powerful image. It's I've seen the cover. It's really awesome, and just the idea of the person sitting, Corey's sitting on a throne of all his previous guitars. Like, if anything ever happened to me, I wish someone would do that for me. It's an incredibly cool way to honor your friend. Not to turn too sharply a corner from that, but to kind of go back a little bit on something you were talking about before, and I wanted to ask before you started discussing it, is Steph, you've obviously 50-50 of the writing and the creating, and Matt kind of let us in a little bit on how you getting involved with the recording of the music and stuff like that. So how much are you involved with, like, do you help write lyrics? are you kind of like an editor's eye or editor's ear to
I'd say I'm
to
more
the
of an
music?
editor's eye and ear. There are a few of the lyrics that I have consulted on. I don't want to go so far as to say I've written lyrics. I have helped in a way that's helped create them. I guess is the easiest way. It's kind of hard to put into words my involvement with the music. I do some backup vocals on a couple of tracks, but yeah, I'm mostly an editorial eye, but I definitely consulted in kind of the creation of some of the lyrics. I've never written music before. It's not something that came naturally to me, but I have been involved with all of the song lyrics that weren't written previously in some way, shape, or form.
I think it's incredibly important for a project like this to have, your like someone like yours perspective, where you're not, a quote unquote a musician, but you have an ear. You have a listener's ear almost, so you can provide a very trusted perspective that a musician would not have, because a musician would be thinking probably in more different terms of like the song, probably thinking more about the more technical aspects of things, or the structure or the tone or the notes and keys used, as opposed to a listener's ear, where it'd be how does this feel, like how does this just sound in a general sense, because that's incredibly important. Whenever I'm mixing something, I'm doing it all myself, so I always have like I'm always DMing like 6 or 7 of my buddies, like, all right, I need some ears.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you hearing that I'm not hearing? What's sounding good? And what could sound better? And I just recently was passing something along, and I got a lot of great feedback, and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did this, because I and some of them are musicians, some of them aren't. Some are just big metalheads, and they're like this is great, but maybe bring this down, or this seemed kind of weird, like so
I think that's invaluable. There's a lot of songs that Matt will record and he'll send it to me. Well, all of the songs that he records, he sends to me, but there's a lot of them that he'll say, listen to this one section and let me know what you think. Are my vocals sounding strong enough? Is the music too loud? Those types of things. Even though I may not create music in the capacity that everybody else on the album that's involved does, I still know music enough to say, hey, this part we may want to revisit, or this part sounds awesome. I love this part. This is my favorite part of the song. Those types of things, as a music fan, anybody can identify with.
that's just super invaluable. It's almost more valuable to me sometimes than hearing a fellow musician say like, yeah, beat some, telling me more of a technical note. It's like, yeah, okay, but having someone who's just like, I don't know what tuning you're in, I don't know what you're doing, but like this section from here to here, I really liked what when that happened. And
that's
so
pretty much exactly what I'll say too. And Matt's response is always, you don't have to be a musician to tell me. I just need somebody else to hear it that is a fan and knows the music and knows my process to tell me whether it sounds right or not.
And it's great that Matt has that trusted set of ears to do so. Earlier, when we first started, you kind of mentioned that you're really into doom metal and that kind of stuff. Are there specific doom bands? Because doom stoner metal, they can be interchangeable, I guess, in terms of like, oh, it's doom metal, no, it's stoner metal. Like it's all just the same.
They're all the same.
It's
funny that
it's slow low.
The classifications for music is always so interesting to me, because you have these people that say, oh, that's not considered that. But what I, as a new metal fan, a budding metal fan of maybe 2 or 3 years, considers doom metal, I love Apocalypse Orchestra, and I love, of course, My Dying Bride. They've been around forever, but again, I'm still in the process of discovering new bands, so that's what I'm digging.
Okay. Yeah, it really is interesting, because even when I'm looking for new bands, like there's a band that's recently, I guess they're kind of new, but they're called Orbit Culture, and they are, I guess, classified as groove death metal, and I'm like, okay, but I hear them and I hear Metallica and Gojira, you know.
Nice.
So they actually put out probably one of my favorite albums of last year called Nisha, and it's just weird seeing them classified as that, and then I'll go to a different website and they're classified as just heavy metal or death metal or mellow death, and it's like I don't know, like it's like there's no overseeing body of metal.
Yeah.
That's like, okay, submit your band, we'll tell you what you are, and that's what it is.
Exactly.
Because I hear doom metal, I hear stuff like, when the sword gets more doomy, but stuff that's more reminiscent of like early Sabbath and stuff like that.
Right. Exactly.
That's where it's not very fast. The guitars don't have a ton of gain on them, and it's just very creepy, creepy and almost methodic. with
creepy is totally my jam, so that's probably why I like it.
All right. Well,
yeah, for me, I'm normally looking at like much heavier stuff. I mean, the Artisan era has basically ruined me when it comes to guitar players that are just absolutely out of control, and my ears just are like, come on now.
Yeah.
But bands like Symbolic, like I mentioned Zach Leeser earlier, he is an incredible. If you've not looked at him, you should look at him. It's ZAC LEASER, and he's got a lot. I think he's got 7 solo albums on Bandcamp.
Oh, wow.
Really, really amazing technical guitar player. The band And Oceans came back after like 20 years and put out an incredible black metal album called Cosmic World Mother last year. There's a folk metal band that I just got turned on to at the end of 2020 called Eisenmore that have got 2 insane violin players in that band that are just going 1,000 miles an hour. And something interesting, we have a violin player on the first single we released for this album named Andrew Polo, the song The Perilous Prospects of Shadow's Haven. And I sent the link for the campaign over to the Eisenmore guys and sent them that video, and they're like, oh man, we really like your violin player on there. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm like, Andrew's gonna dig this, knowing that the guys from Eisenmore think he's cool, because I know he thinks the Eisenmore guys are cool.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I know Steph mentioned Inferi earlier, and Inferi is an incredible band. Hailstorm, they've got some stuff. Their most recent album is amazing. They have a song called Tortuga. It's got a guy named Captain Yarface in there, and Captain Yarface is just everything that is right about metal, because to me, one of the reasons I like folk metal is because metal is so dark and so evil and so powerful and all that, but then like you get folk metal and you start laughing and you're like, you just have this overload of emotions. You're like, I'm smiling while listening to blast beats. This shouldn't be happening. And then you listen to like Hailstorm and you're like, dude, these guys are just having fun and making fun of the metal that they're playing while they're doing it, and you're just having a good time.
Yeah,
it's nice to have that different kind of feel every once in a while.
Yeah, I've definitely jammed some Hailstorm before. It's the thing with metal is it can be incredibly dark and cryptic and deal with heavy things, but it can also not take itself seriously, and it can just have fun. And again, you can be smiling and chuckling while there's blast beats and guttural vocals happening, and
all about it. The very first metal show that I went to was Navel of Isildur, right? That was my first one.
Yep, Navel of Isildur.
And I had never been to a metal show before, and just the energy from the crowd and the band, and we saw Inferi live as well. And Matt has these pictures of me where I'm just smiling from ear to ear, because I had never experienced. I've been to a lot of concerts in my life, never experienced the vibe and the feel at a metal show, and how much fun everyone's having. It's a great experience. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps me drawn into metal more than any other genre, because I listen to plenty of other genres of music. It's but something that keeps my heart kind of rooted in metal is just that there's something for everything. If I'm feeling just I want something dark and deep and just angry, I could find 1,000 instances of that. If I want something that's kind of almost bouncy and dancey but still heavy, I can find that. And if I find something that just makes me grin from ear to ear because it's cheese, some people might get mad at me this, but Amon Amarth kind of does that for me too, because I like Viking metal. It's great.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's also like I don't. It does that thing for me where it's like it doesn't seem like it's taking itself that seriously. So you can kind of have someone's when they're telling the story of this tragic tale, it's just kind of like much more entertainment than like I'm in it, and I'm the Viking too, and I'm experiencing this. It's just like, no, this is fun. I know there's some very serious Amon Amarth people out there, so that's why I don't mean to diss them because they are an amazing band. But yeah,
I'd say one of the coolest things I ever saw was at an Amon Amarth show, and they all, right in the middle of the show, they were like, "Oh, we need to raise a toast to everyone in the crowd," and everybody had their drinking horn. All the band members had their drinking horn attached. And they all took a drink from their drinking horn they had on their belt loop, and I was like, I just thought that was cool as crap.
Yeah.
I'm like, who carries a freaking legit real drinking horn on their belt loop to play metal?
How's that? How's that? That's just not supposed to be like, we're all here to have fun, man. Like, I got a drinking horn.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of the most fun shows. I haven't gone to a ton of concerts, just hasn't happened for me. But one of the most fun shows I ever saw was Sabatone, and they were opening for Epica and Nightwish. Not Epica. Delane opened for Sabatone, who opened for Nightwish. And that was like, it was just at a club in Chicago, and no big light show, no big overseas festival pyro or anything like that. But those guys were having so much fun on stage. Like, when I bought the tickets, I bought it for Nightwish and Delane, and I'm like, I don't know about these Sabatone guys. I listen to the music. I'm like, this seems like really, they're singing about wars and history, and like, that's just, I don't know. Like, it's good, it's well done. It's just not for me. But then seeing their personalities, and I'm like, now I'm a big fan because I know the personalities behind it, and the sheer just kind of insanity that these guys have, and just the fact that they sold me, while they're all cramped together on a small stage in a club in Chicago, because they don't have the luxury of the giant arenas like they might have, or the giant festivals overseas, but they killed it, and I think that's one of the great things about metal too, is like the live experience. The few live experiences I have had of metal is so telling to like how a band is, because I've been to an Ozfest, I've been to a few Metallica shows and stuff like that, and it's just you get a better understanding of a band and a better idea of how to take their music after you see them live. So that is one of my bigger regrets, is not going to more live shows when I was younger, but for good or bad, because there's been I remember a Black Label Society show I went to that was not the best experience ever, but that had more to do with the people than the band, because yeah it was a bit rowdy, let's just say.
Let me tell you, one of the bands that really changed my impression of them live was Karik Angren. I heard some songs from them, and just the stuff I heard just wasn't stuff that really caught my ear. And then I saw them, oddly enough, open up for Flesh God Apocalypse on one of the other tours that Flesh God was on. And my goodness gracious, their frontman was just absolutely incredible. Their live sound was incredible. I was blown away and had a whole different respect for them after seeing them, and became a fan of their sound. Just they really blew me away with their over the top performance live.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always like a really good feeling to just like discover a new get a new understanding of something, even if it's a band or a comic or anything like that, just through meeting the creator or seeing the band live and things like that. It's something that hopefully I know you two are still very active and doing shows and wherever you can and all that, and keeping that spirit alive of just bringing stuff to the people. And I'm hoping the things die down enough so we have our big. I'm in the Chicago area, so C2E2 is our huge show, and that's the one I always do every year, and I look forward to it every year. And so I'm hoping by December things are, relatively cool enough to where I can get back there and I can kind of get that live experience of the creators and stuff like that once again, because it's missed it more than I thought I would over this past year.
Yeah, we were really surprised to see C2E2 and Emerald City both are back-to-back weekends in December now. We're like, man, they're really trying to hurt some people by trying to get them to travel to cold weather cities in December right before Christmas.
Well, being from Chicago, early December winter is much different than end of February winter where they had it last year. It's very different. It's not as brutal. It's still cold, but there's still some whimsy to the fact, oh, it's winter. Oh, there's snow on the ground. It's not quite Christmas yet, so there's still some positivity and optimism in the air around that time of the year, as opposed to February where it's just everything sucks. Why is it still cold?
Yeah, that was actually last year was kind of a trip where C2E2 that was the first show of the big con season, and nobody at the time knew it was going to be the last.
Yep.
Steph and I were actually scheduled to be at Emerald City in Seattle, and we were supposed to be on the show floor with Richard Rivera from Scout Comics, the writer of Stabity Bunny and Shadowplay, because he is actually a character in Tales from Nocturnia.
Oh.
And the issue where he was going to be involved was supposed to debut at Emerald City, and we were infamously a part of the first show that got canceled for COVID.
Yeah, I remember, just seeing a lot of my buddies just like wondering like what's going on, like, and then it's the tide turning from like what's going on with Emerald to, okay, I'm not gonna do it, I'm gonna lose this money, this sucks, to Emerald being like, okay, they refunded us. Like just that whole tension in the air, because these are not cheap tables. These are not. It's not a cheap. As you brought up before, it's not a cheap thing to do a con. You got to pay for everything and all that. So at least people were able to, as far as I know, cancel things with the appropriate amount of time to not lose any cash and stuff like that. Because no one really goes into comics to be millionaires, right? All right, well, thanks to the magic of the internet, unfortunately, Steph got kicked out of the session, and we can't get her back in, and so we're going to wrap up. So, Matt, if you could let everybody in the internet land know where they can find your Kickstarter, your socials, and just in general where they can find all your awesome Tales of Nocturnia and Heirs of Isildur stuff.
Sure, absolutely. So, if you want to go to the Kickstarter, it is at tinyurl.com/heirs versus TFN, and that's HEIRS VS TFN. We've got the new metal album, which is 5 songs for Heirs of Isildur, 5 songs for Tales from Nocturnia. You can get it on MP3, CD, and we have 2 different splatter vinyl options. We have the Portal version, which is black, blue, and red, and then we have the Dragon's Lair version, which is a neon orange with green splatter version of the album. That is going to be the best place to go right now to try and get anything from us. If you want to get a hold of everything we've done steampunk, go ahead and do it. We've got tiers up there for you. If you want to get just the medieval stuff that's based on Tales from Nocturnia, we've got tiers up there for you as far as that goes as well. If you're a music fan and you want to get both of the albums, you can get them on MP3 or CD. We've got the different albums up there. You can get drawn into our next comic, Into the Perilous Prospects. We have tiers for that. And we have a lot of things and add-ons. We just added something in. It may be gone by the time this thing posts, but we had our main cover artist, Renan Shodi from Brazil, that added up the original 2 pages of art for the cover. It took two 16-inch pages to be able to draw the cover art for Heirs of Isildur versus Tales from Nocturnia. So he offered that up to be sent directly to your house. Awesome. As one of a kind. When this posts, I think we'll have like 7 or 8 days left on the campaign. We'd really like to see you guys get in and get over there. One thing you'll see about us is that we don't treat people like you're just numbers and dollars. We want you to feel like when you get in there, you've joined an experience. We try to have fun with things. We try to find ways to give back to you. We've already hit quite a few stretch goals at this point. We've got trading cards that holofoil trading cards that any physical backer is going to get. We have a couple of PDF packs. We're very close to the next stretch goal, so by the time this thing posts, we'll probably be well past that. Let's hope. And like I said, we try to find ways to give back to the people that were in early. We want the person that was in first to feel like they're just as important to us as the campaign goes on as the 100th backer, and so on and so forth. One thing we do also do is we do post-campaign drawings. So if you get in and you back other creators' campaigns that we have on our list, and you let us know, you could put onto that drawing after the campaign is done. We've done really fun things like, last time we were giving away some foil covers and some limited edition variant covers that we had done, and people are getting some added incentives. And if you're on 5 different drawing lists and you have your name pulled in all 5, well, it's just your lucky day. So, like I said, we really hope you go up there and take a look at our campaign, and consider our campaign. Some of the new music is up there. Really a personal story, a personal project for us when it comes to all the music that's there. And like Steph said earlier, people are really wanting to know the fate of Michael Isildur, and we will absolutely make sure you know what his fate is. Is he alive? Is he perished? Is he somewhere in between? You're going to know where he's at by the end of the issue. You're going to know the players are going to be involved when we get ready to start doing the Perilous Prospects, and we're going to be able to jump right into that storyline head first and have a lot of fun with that one when it comes out. As far as other places to get a hold of us, you can go to our website at insymmetrycreations.com. You can find me at Dr. Anguish. You can find Steph at Steph Cannon Writes. But pretty much everything we do is going to be, you can at least get a hold of us to start at the Insym sites, /Insym on Facebook, at Insym Creations on Twitter, and then Insymmetry Creations on Instagram, and insymmetrycreations.com for our main website.
Well, Matt, you did a fantastic job of explaining the tiers you have. The vinyl looks insane. Like I don't collect vinyl. I don't have anything to play vinyl on, and I'm like, this looks rad. I kind of want that, even though I have no way to use it.
It could be good for a wall display. I'm telling you, it'd be good for a wall display.
But no, you have. I was checking out the tiers earlier. You just have a ton of great tiers. You guys are obviously very passionate. You and Steph have created a, just awesome experience. You're really catering to your fans, and also really creating a bridge to new ones. Like you said, with the giveaways and the things like that, you are very passionate people, and you've clearly infused all of that into your works and how you present yourselves and how you want to just get your stories out there and give them to people. So, I applaud you for that once again. So, Matt, it's been an absolute blast having you and Steph on. Unfortunately, she can't join us for the end here, but, Stephanie, thank you. It's been a blast. I wish we can keep talking more about metal and stuff like that, but I know you got to get to bed.
Hey, we're around, man. Throw us a message. We can keep talking metal. Like I said, we'll have more music that's going to be coming out, and definitely anytime we can talk, man.
And even if we can't connect, then I highly doubt this will be the last time you guys are on the show.
Hey, sounds good to us. We'll be proud of or happy to be back anytime you want us, man.
All right, man. And you go back it. It's in this post. You're gonna have about a week left. They're just blowing through stretch goals. That it's insane. Like, just go back it. You're not gonna be disappointed in any way, shape, or form. I'm probably gonna go make sure I back it after we end this conversation, just so I don't forget. But yeah, so you better not forget, because I'm reminding you right now. Go shut this podcast off. Stop listening to me talk. Go back it now. All right, Matt, Stephanie, thank you.